part of the problem your brain is always facing is, what can I ignore? And the answer to that is, well, you need to ignore almost everything, and that's a problem, because of course it's not always obvious what's okay for you to ignore, and that changes on you suddenly too, because you have imperfect knowledge, you might think something's irrelevant and it turns out to be of critical importance. It's a deadly difficult problem. And so one of the ways that we solve this is we're actually pretty blind to almost everything. Our sensory input is limited by our physiological limitations, certainly. So there's, like, in terms of vision, we only see a very small little slice of the whole electromagnetic spectrum, and it's the same with sounds, and we can only touch things that are basically within our reach, and so that limits things substantially. And then there are also things we can't detect, like we're not very good at detecting, like we don't have the same ability that, say, platypuses and some fish can detect electromagnetic disturbances around them on their skin, and like there's senses that we don't have. So we're narrowed a fair bit by what it is that we're able to perceive. And we're actually narrowed in what we can perceive far more than anybody ever guessed. So I'm going to show you a little video here, and hopefully it'll be loud enough so that you can hear it.
The monkey business illusion. Count how many times the player's wearing white pass the ball. Did you spot the gorilla? For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half missed the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color for the player on the black team leaving the game?
So how many of you saw the gorilla? Well, no, let's do it the other way. See the gorilla. Okay. How many of you had known about this video beforehand? Yeah, the gorilla part of it. Yeah, so you guys don't count. Now and then, I get someone who's seen it before and they still miss the damn gorilla, so that's pretty funny. So, but of course, Dan Simon set this up because his original video got so popular, virally popular, that everybody has seen the invisible gorilla. And so, now he's showing you that, well, you think you're smart, you've been clued into how blind you are, and it turns out you're not any smarter than you were to begin with, right? So how many people saw all three things that changed?
I saw the video before, though.
Oh, you've seen it before. So, okay, and how many didn't? Yeah, okay, so the vast majority of you missed one or more of the things that changed. And they're not really trivial things, like the disappearance of a person from 6 people, that's fairly major, and the whole background changed color, and you might think you'd clue into that. And so the weird thing is, even when you're primed to notice what you're supposed to notice, which is to say count the balls, and you know that something weird is going to happen, that still doesn't prime you enough so that you can keep track of all the weird things that are happening. And like, this was an absolutely staggering experiment when it was first shown. The psychologists were just like knocked over by it, because the hypothesis up to that point had been always that you could concentrate on what you were concentrating on, but if something anomalous or unexpected happened, your attention would be automatically devoted towards it. And of course that's what people would think, right? You'd think that if you're watching people play basketball and a gorilla walks into the, you know, area and it's not small, that of course you'd be surprised and you'd see it, and it turns out that that's just wrong. And you know, it tells you a lot about how your nervous system is set up. So you're focusing on counting the balls, and so for some reason getting the correct answer to the question, how many times is the ball thrown back and forth, turns out to be motivationally significant. Why? Like, why did you, you know, you got the instructions, fair enough, but why did you listen to them? Oh, sure, it does, but the question is, why did you even comply with the instructions?
Because you wanted to get the answer right?
Yeah, who said that? Because you wanted to get the answer right. Why did you care if you got the answer right? Well, think about it for a minute. Like, guess.
That means you're smart?
Means you're smart. Yeah, that's right. So that's one possibility. It's like instantly you sort of interpret it as a little cognitive test, maybe, and then you want to see if you can do it, and you know, so that taps into your hierarchy of values. Part of your value is I want to be maybe a smart and competent person, or I want to be at least as smart and competent as everyone else is playing this game. And so, you know, the instruction taps into a pre-existent value structure, and then it's motivating. Okay, so yeah.
Compliance?
What, compliance as well? Yes, that's another thing. It's like that, you know, the room in some ways is set up to ensure a degree of compliance, right? Because there's an implicit story in the room, which is, if I'm at the front of it, and so that sort of makes me at the top of the dominance hierarchy, and the fact that you're here means you've already bought into that presupposition, and so it's a logical thing to do to play along with the game. So, yes?
Or it can also be that, like, you might be curious about what could happen if you get the answer right. 'Cause maybe
True, that's more like the playing a game issue, right? Is that, well, maybe something interesting will happen. Okay, right. Okay, so there's a variety of reasons why you might listen to the instructions, but the point is the instructions actually tap into your motivation, in your intrinsic motivation enough, so that you will in fact attempt to play the game. And then as soon as you play the game, what happens? Well, you focus your very limited attentional resources precisely on what it is that you're supposed to do. Now, we could talk a little bit about how the visual field is set up. So, you know, you notice that, like, if I'm looking around the room, if I want to see you, all of you, I can't just stand here and look straight ahead. Because all you people over here, you're like, I can't see, if I'm looking straight ahead, I can't see the faces of anyone past here. And I can only see them sort of as blurs, and unless they move. And if they move up something, then I can see the movement, but I can't, it's not clear to me what's moving. And it's the same for the people over here. The only person I can really see right now is the woman who's sitting there in the white sweater. All the rest of you are like, and the person to the right, I can more or less, as long as I look at her, I can more or less see that he's dressed in gray, but I can't see his face at all. Now he nodded his head and I can pick that up. So what's very strange about your visual system, and your sensory systems are like this you know, all your sensory systems are like this, is that you have a tiny little point of focus where the information is rich, and that's partly because, so the center of your eye is the fovea, and it's most densely packed with cells, but more importantly, each of the cells in your fovea, which is the very center of your vision, you can tell when someone's pointing their fovea at you, because then you have the sense that they're looking at you, and human beings are unbelievably good at figuring out when someone is pointing their fovea at you. We can detect what would you call it? Deviation from direct gaze with an accuracy that's absolutely remarkable. Now each of those little cells in the fovea is connected, each of the one cells is connected to like 20,000 cells at the first level of the hierarchy of the visual system. And so the reason that your whole eye isn't fovea is because your head would have to be this big to manage it. So, you know, what's evolved is sort of a compromise, is that in the center of your vision, the center of your vision is very, very detailed. And then what you do is you zip that center around, like snap, 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 and your brain sort of makes a amalgamated picture out of all those little snapshots. And, you know, then it weaves it together so it seems to you like it's a continuous movie of consciousness, even though it's really not. And then the sides of your eyes, the periphery of your eyes, well, they don't have the same potency as the fovea. And so they kind of play a triage game. It's like, okay, I can't see, if I'm looking straight ahead, I can't see everything. What might I use as an indication that I should move my gaze from where I'm looking to somewhere else? And one answer to that is movement. So the periphery is pretty good at picking up movement. And so often if you see movement in the periphery, then you'll move your foveal vision to where the movement was, and then, you know, then you can keep track of what's changing. So what your brain sort of assumes is that when you're looking at something, everything else is irrelevant, and it also sort of fades into the background. And so that's what's happening with the gorilla video. And so part of the reason you can't see the damn gorilla is because he's dressed in black like the players. And so when you're focusing on the basketball, all the black moving things look the same. You know, there's no distinction between them at all. And then the background of the curtain, it's like, well, first of all, why would you be primed to see the curtain change color? Like, things just don't do that in real life, right? I mean, big objects don't suddenly change color, or very, very seldomly. So, and more importantly, the fact that the gorilla shows up, the fact that one player leaves, and the fact that the curtains change color has no bearing whatsoever on whether or not you can complete the task.